everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of the Atheist Experience. We're live. It's December 11th, 2011, which means it's my brother's birthday, so happy birthday, even though he's busy, probably not watching.
Yeah.
I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Martin Wagner.
Howdy do.
Welcome. How are you?
I am well. Thank you very much.
Last night, this is, by the way, is a live public access television program sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, except for the first Sunday when we have our lecture series. And then, like today, we had the board meeting. And you can find out all about the Atheist Community of Austin at our webpage, www.atheist-community.org. There's a frequently asked questions page there, calendar events, a little tag thing on the side that will point out special events that were going on, which would have pointed out that last night was the ACA holiday party, except that we actually forgot to put it on the thing and for some people to meet up. So there's only about 8 of us, but I cooked my butt off, and there were meatballs, cheese balls.
So I would have been there to eat all of that stuff.
There's leftovers. Come on over.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think I should. Good. I'm good with meatballs.
Yeah, and it's I said holiday party because I don't know what anybody else celebrates.
Because it's the war on Christmas that we are waging against.
And I don't really care.
Yeah.
And my thing is, it's Christmas at my house. It just is. To me, Christmas is both a religious holiday and then a secular holiday. And if you ask people, name the 5 things that you think of when you think of Christmas, the odds of Jesus being on that list of 5 or something religious being on that list of 5, probably pretty good. But when you rank them, it may not come in at the top. I mean, not when you've got like Santa and presents and trees and candy canes and frosty.
Depends on the degree
reindeer.
of hardcore fundamentalism in the individual person.
And by the way, the secular aspects of this, or the part that was stolen from pagan traditions and then morphed into more secular aspects, this war on Christmas thing was won a long time ago. There are Christian sects that don't even celebrate it anymore. It's no. That's just become this commercialization, secular extravaganza.
Well, Scripture itself has this prohibition against decorating trees, right?
It can certainly be interpreted that way.
Yeah. I mean, so like so many things in the Bible can be interpreted in so many ways. So
about decorating your trees and pagan totems, etc. Anyway, I celebrate Christmas, just not Christmas. It's Xmas.
Yeah.
But you guys and anybody out there, feel free to celebrate whatever you want for whatever reason you want. Call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
Don't celebrate if you don't want to. I just happen to think, being consistent with my view that we should take the good and leave the bad wherever we find it, including things in religious origins, that Christmas, the way we celebrate it, the way I celebrate it, it's a kind of holiday that I'd feel good about inventing if it didn't already exist. This idea of taking time off and sharing time with others, exchanging gifts maybe, but just enjoying each other.
Yeah, just peace and goodwill, etc., etc. Why not?
But I laugh a little bit because for the same reason that I don't tell somebody happy birthday on my birthday, I don't run around saying Merry Christmas to people at random because I don't know what they're celebrating. On the other hand, everybody seems to. There are people who are pushing for this. No, you need to say Happy Holidays. Okay, if we can ignore the word origin that holidays is holy days, then certainly we can ignore the Christ part of Christmas.
Yeah.
It's never been a big deal for me.
It just blows my mind that people could just get so hung up on this kind of thing, like how we label things, what we call things, identities of things, and it's you have to flatter my own idea of how this is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you are somehow insulting and offending me, and it's like honestly, just get a grip. I mean, it's completely the opposite of the character of what the whole period is supposed to be about, which is we put aside all these stupid little petty niggling differences and just decide to be nice to each other.
Yeah, I was going to invite Ray Comfort to the party, but he's in California. So, Ray, next time you're in Austin for Christmas, you can come over and see our pretty red and white tree. But so anyway, this in addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a couple of podcasts, including Nonprofits, which is pretty much on hiatus probably until after the new year. Although there's a chance we may squeeze in a show this coming Saturday. And Godless Bitches, which is recorded every Monday night. They did one last week. They're doing another one this week. I don't know for sure if there'll be one the following week, as that's when we're getting ready to head out on vacation and stuff. You can find out more. You can find links to those from the Atheist Community of Austin's website. And you can go to nonprofitsradio.com for information about nonprofits. And There's a bunch of other events coming up in the area. I know that CFI is having its Saturnalia festivities next Saturday, which I'm not for sure whether or not I'll be able to actually attend it. And I think instead of going through a whole list of announcements, since we've already directed people to the website, just want to let people know that after the show's over, the people involved get together for dinner at El Arroyo. They'll have the address up at the bottom of the screen.
Right there.
Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us. You don't have to be a member to attend. And I just kind of, how do you feel about like shotgunning calls? Like, let's see how many calls we can get in reasonably. I mean, if somebody needs more time, that's great. But please don't be offended if we just like take the question and move on.
Let's do it.
You want to have fun?
Indeed.
All right.
Been a while for me.
Sure.
So I'm ready.
I want to start here. William, Grand Junction, how are you? What's your question or comment?
Thank you. I'm doing great. My comment, I guess you could say, is in reference to sometimes you've referenced someone referring to themselves as a devout atheist.
Yeah, that was Kirk Cameron, who claims he used to be a devout atheist, and my objection is that doesn't really make any sense.
Right. Well, it does and it doesn't, because I'm not disagreeing with you, but I have referenced myself as a devout atheist. And when I reference myself as a devout atheist, I'm not saying that, hallelujah, I'm an atheist. I'm using it more as a stick or a pun to argue a Christian's position. In other words, I'm saying that when I say I'm a devout atheist, I'm saying I'm an atheist because, I've actually studied up and I know I know about your religion, and I can argue your points, and I'm not taking that position. I like I said, I don't use it as saying, oh yeah, I'm a, all-knowing, whatever. I say, like I said, I'm poking at them with a stick when I say the word. And I think most people that do refer to themselves as devout atheists, that's kind of the way they think about it, from my perspective.
People who refer to themselves as devout atheists don't know what devout means.
I do understand what devout means, but like I said, I'm using it in a context to basically poke, not to influence the argument. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I'm extremely confident, shall we say, in my atheism. I'm very comfortable at it. I'm comfortable in my own skin and with that. But again, I do think that this is another one of these instances of being very easily falling into the trap of getting hung up on words and terms, and if you want to sort of, in the way of making a satirical point to Christians, use that term. I mean, again, you can call yourself whatever you like, but I think that my only resistance maybe to using a term like devout atheist is, of course, I don't want that to be misinterpreted and want my perhaps sense of humor to be misunderstood.
Understandable.
So I don't want to come across also as someone who is simply unwilling to change his mind, which of course is a criticism that skeptics quite often get, that we're all closed-minded and everything, which is often the believers doing the projecting and everything. But again, I just don't want to fall into that trap. What I'm willing to say is, I am completely comfortable with my views as an atheist, but even when I will say to you, I'll look at you straight in the eye and I'll say with very high degree of confidence that I don't believe God exists, I'm not making any sort of a dogmatic statement. I'm not making a statement of any kind of inviolable belief that I'm not willing to, modify if evidence warrants. So I try to be careful about that, and I think it's unwise for people to get hung up on just words and terms when we should be thinking about the ideas and just evaluating the ideas.
I understand. Give you a little background. Hello? I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, I was saying, I think if anything, I'm a devout skeptic, not a devout atheist.
Well, to give you a little background, I was actually kicked out of church at the age of 8 for simply asking questions. I was uninvited back, and so was the rest of my family. And you can imagine an 8-year-old not being that forceful, I guess you can say. But I just find it kind of ironic that I was kicked out of church at 8 years old just for asking questions. And since then, I've been, discriminated against, I guess you could say. I'm a veteran of 3 tours. and I was a very outspoken atheist when I was in the military. I was discriminated against. I was actually refused promotion because of my position. And it's just kind of funny because, I lean to the right on a lot of issues, but it's kind of funny that all of a sudden if I'm an atheist, now I'm a communist hater. And how disrespectful atheists in general are, or disrespected atheists in general are, just for simply saying, I don't believe that. And I find it kind of ironic that the very first words in the First Amendment to our Constitution say, Congress shall pass no law in respect to the establishment of religion. And then, you hear Christians say, well, the Constitution gives you, guarantees you the right to, freedom of religion.
Well, the way American culture, our culture has sort of settled into place, certainly doesn't necessarily always jibe with the letter of the Constitution, right? And of course, I haven't been in the military, but Jen and Matt and everybody, and I do read up on a lot of these things, and I understand that there is this culture of religious fundamentalism that is just inherent in the military these days, and they really push that. And a lot of things that the military seems to do that go against what they are supposed to do, which is ostensibly supposed to do, right? Which is defend the Constitution.
Right.
And so, I'm sure quite a lot of servicemen understand that. It's sort of like, yes, you want to protest against what we're doing, but, I'm the guy who's fighting for your right to protest, as long as you know that. But at the same time, I've met military guys who will just sit there and say something like, "Oh, if you don't like America, get the GTFO," right? And I'm like,
right.
Well, wait a minute. You took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution when you went into the service, and yet you're basically telling people that they shouldn't exercise their free speech rights if they have some problems with it. So it's like, why would a military person of all people be against what the Constitution protects? So, and I don't think they think of that, but that's cultural. So.
Right. Well, I wanted to say, I've had a really tough time in my life being the outsider, being the atheist, and when I found your show, I was happy. It was the first time in my life that I found that there were people out there like me, and just to watch your show, it just makes me proud that, Matt, you are absolutely amazing. I've seen you on many, many, many shows.
He's going to start wanting some money if you pop up his head like that. So
yeah, well, I know, but
be careful.
You definitely give me pride. Make me feel like I'm not alone, and
I appreciate that, and I really appreciate that. Although the parts of the show that you thought you liked are not populated by people telling us how cool we are. But back to one quick point you had made about getting kicked out of church at like 8. I've heard this from other people, and without being insulting, I can't even believe it. It doesn't make sense to me because there's not a single church that I went to that would have done anything like this. What kind of church was it?
Yeah, just think they're the church that wilted in front of the questions of an 8-year-old, right?
Right. Well,
why would you want to be that church?
It's called the Church of the Unity, and and what it was is the reason they explained it to my mother, and I remember it very vividly, was because that I was asking questions that my teacher could not answer, and because I was asking these questions in front of other kids,
you were bad.
I was not only was I damning myself to hell, but I was putting doubt in the minds of the other children and damning them to hell also.
See? And much easier to just terrorize people with threats than actually answer the frickin' questions.
I just like the fact that there are extremely incompetent Sunday school teachers.
Yeah. And
it's not like they go to training for this.
That was my first leap. I've always been an atheist, but that was my first leap of, well, maybe what they're telling me isn't the truth. So I started looking, and I don't take anything on face value anymore. I'm very skeptical now. And I guess I can thank the church for that. The church made me an atheist just by simply saying, well, I can't answer your question, and since you don't accept my answer, that you're going to burn in hell for all eternity, and you're a horrible, awful person.
What a nice thing to say to an 8-year-old child.
I do have an 18-year-old son that I raised to know about religion, but has never accepted any religious viewpoints. He is now 18, almost 19 years old. He doesn't drink. He doesn't smoke. He doesn't do drugs. He is a virgin by choice. He actually broke up with his last girlfriend because he refused to sleep with her. And I find it.
And he's really good at lying to his dad.
That Christianity speak of. I managed to raise my son without that book of fiction, and he's a great person. Any Christian girl would be happy to have him, if he believed in God.
Except for the whole going to hell thing, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
well, we got callers waiting. We were going to try and shotgun these. William, thanks a lot for calling, and thanks
we do
for
appreciate
your
it,
service.
but we want to get some momentum here. So thanks. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. No, right anytime.
Mike in Alamosa. What's today? It's all Colorado. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, doing great. Yeah, I had 2 in a row. I was going to ask you a question about a previous show. It was episode 714 about Dan Patrick. And I wasn't familiar with the guy, but apparently he is like a speaker who's promoting these laws that would require people before they get an abortion to jump through hoops and get all this information.
He's a state representative from Houston, Texas.
Oh, that guy.
State senator from Houston, Texas. My bad.
Okay. Now, in there you said, I didn't say anything. Dan... What's that?
Don was on that day, and I believe it was Don that was talking about Dan Patrick.
That's right. I'm sorry. I meant the show.
The royal
didn't
you.
mean
Okay.
you exactly. The person on the show said, I don't believe that Dan is actually trying to reduce abortions. And then kind of as evidence, he gives this argument I've heard before that's basically, because Dan is not willing to, adopt these at-risk children and pay for their college and everything, therefore he's not being consistent. And I don't see how that's valid.
There's a huge... Okay, first of all, I think it's probably best if you email tv@atheist-community.org so that you can talk to Don, who did the show that day, and he can explain exactly what he meant and why. I have no doubt that personally, in Dan's head, he's trying to end abortion. My problem is, and I think this is the point that Don was trying to make about Dan Patrick, is that there are ways to minimize the number of abortions that take place, and in a purely rational, scientific fashion, which we have evidence for, which are perfectly responsible actions. And Dan is opposed to those on his religious grounds. And so he's really working against his own goals. And I think that conflict is what Don was probably trying to point out.
And that is indicative of a lot of what goes on in the whole anti-choice movement, too, which is there are very, very easy ways to prevent unwanted pregnancies, and that's, get people very well and comprehensively sexually educated so that they understand all of the risks involved in having sex, and they also know that if you choose to have sex, because you simply cannot make people do, you can't make everyone in the world decide to be celibate. So in those cases, you want to make sure that people have a proper understanding of contraception, condom use, pills, IUDs, what have you. And the anti-choice movement, the anti-abortion movement, is also thoroughly opposed to educating people on those matters. So the things that are out there that would prevent unwanted pregnancies are also things that people who don't like abortions don't want to see happening. And this, I think, leads to a very valid criticism that this really isn't necessarily so much about reducing abortions as it is this attempt to just control the sexuality of Americans.
And you can actually go farther and make a fairly good case, and I'll refer you to Godless Bitches, which I'm sure they'll make the case, if they haven't already, that this is really more about a sense of moral superiority and punishing women.
Mm-hmm. And it is women, right? I mean, it's...
I don't get to get pregnant, so...
Yeah. The people out there on the anti-abortion, there may not be all of them, but there is definitely a movement among the same people who are against abortion who want to make, not just Plan B and not just RU486 and these sorts of things, but birth control pills at all they want to make them impossible to get. A lot of women take the pill for non-sexual, non-reproductive reasons, right? There are a whole host of medical reasons why women might be on the pill. But you never see these people trying to make it illegal for men to get Viagra.
Yeah, those are very interesting points about contraception, but my question was about the claims that were made about how, because ththese people don't, adopt these kids after they were born.
I would agree with you that I would not necessarily agree that there's the one thing necessarily follows the other logically. But like Matt said, you might want to email the TV show address and ask Don Baker if he would clarify what he meant by that.
Yeah, because the point. I mean, I can't really speak for Don, but when you say something like that, your refusal to adopt all of these kids means that you're not really opposed to abortion. I think he's talking about not providing actually practical solutions, but quite frankly, there's an aspect of this where even if Dan Patrick and everybody else were completely willing to adopt all those, who cares? You don't get to force a woman to go through a pregnancy. You cannot violate her bodily rights that way. And so that's what this issue really comes down to. But if you want to take Don up on what he said to Dan, just email TV at atheist-community.org, and hopefully, because we get tons of email, we can't answer all of them.
And Don's not always online, but he's...
Or you can call back on a week when he's on. But I can't defend what he said because, first of all, I didn't say it, I don't remember it, and I might get it wrong.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you disagree also, so...
Well, there are certain ways in which you can validly accuse someone of being a hypocrite, and other ways in which it's not necessarily valid. But like I said, we don't want to, without knowing exactly what Don said, I don't want to try to respond to, what we think he said. So
there's an aspect of this too that I think is kind of humor. Oh, well, you say you're against abortion, but you don't want to go and adopt all of those. I think that's a humorous argument, not necessarily intended to be taken literally, especially since I know Don's aware of the bodily rights argument, et cetera. But yeah, I'd go along that line of emailing or calling back when Don's actually on.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
You. And a bigger problem that I would have just with Dan Patrick here is, I've accessed this article of his, and we have a direct quote from him where he essentially he makes no bones about the fact that this is him attempting to impose his religion on the public at large through his office, which I would suggest is flagrantly unconstitutional. And a quote from him where he says directly, quote, "The good news is through the blood of Jesus Christ he forgives, and women who have aborted children need to know that message." As an elected official, he's not the state preacher. He can't say those kinds of things. And I'd say that is highly, highly unconstitutional when he's out there essentially using his office to proselytize. And so.
Yeah, I'd kind of need to know where he said that and in what context, because he doesn't have to necessarily check his religion at the door, but if he's there as a state senator making statements in his official capacity about how we need to educate women about Jesus Christ.
Well, here's the article on TFN Insider they have, and apparently they have a video of him saying it. So,
oh, awesome.
Yeah, so that's where I got it from.
Right. Maybe we'll get a link up on one of the websites later on the blog.
We shall.
You can post it on the blog.
That I shall do. Yes.
Look at that, thinking and everything.
The internet.
Joe in New Jersey, how are you?
I'm pretty good. First of all, I'd like to wish your brother a happy birthday, Matt.
Thanks on behalf of him.
All right. I recently realized that I was an atheist. I had named myself agnostic because I wasn't certain, but after thinking about it and watching your videos, listening to your show, I realized, I'm pretty much an atheist because I can't see a reason to believe. But I came to think about something, and I kind of wanted your opinion on it. I realized that we talk about a belief system where we talk about how people take their faith in religion based off of books and stuff and what the Bible says, so on and so forth. But in a sense, I guess you could say that we sort of do the same thing in terms of what scientists say, because we can't necessarily verify everything that they say because
we can't.
If we ourselves went and learned and studied and proved it ourselves and did the readings, we could be certain, but otherwise we're kind of taking their what they say as truth, even though we ourselves haven't done the actual research.
Yeah, Gotta kind of disagree. I draw a distinction between trust and faith. Faith is the excuse people give for believing something when they don't have a good reason, and trust is it differs from faith in that it is evidence-based, and it is, I guess, granted in accordance with the evidence that supports it. And so when I read something in a science journal or a finding that's out there, the amount to which I am willing to accept that scientific finding is based on how much I understand it, how reliable the evidence is, what sort of evidence I have towards the reliability of the people that are saying this. But the big thing that's kind of just sitting out there saying, hey, look at me, is this idea that this is all public information, and while you may not necessarily be able to easily go out in your garage and do a test like this, all of their findings are in theory available to the public and are subject to peer review. And so as other scientists test this to see if they can confirm or refute the results, we build up a knowledge base that is the antithesis of faith-based. And so I don't even like to try to link trust and faith, other than, yeah, there are certain things that I accept them all tentatively, that I haven't gone out and tested myself, because it's utterly impractical and silly for me to actually do that. And instead, I talk about this is the best model that we have based on the available evidence and information.
Yeah, look, the difference is one of degree, not just degree, but there are actual material components involved. If you go to your doctor and your doctor says, well, your blood labs are out of range or something like this. Okay, well, now I'm not a doctor, right? And so I don't know how to take these readings. I don't know how to draw blood and examine it for, my liver enzymes and whatever else might be in it. So to a certain degree, yes, you might say I am taking on faith of what he tells me as a doctor. But again, as Matt points out, that's a trust, and it's not the same kind of faith that religion asks you to adopt when it tells you about invisible magic men in the sky who want you to live forever if only you love them enough, right? I mean, that's a very, very different sort of faith. In the case of what my doctor tells me, I can go get a second opinion. I can now get online and I can read up on, there are all these, there's WebMD and all these different sites where, if your doctor says, I think this is what's wrong with you, you can go home, you can check it out yourself. There are people whom you know.
The legal system as well.
Yeah, there are people that we know who are experts who have had the education, had the training, and you can rely upon that. And there's no equivalence in the world of religion, where if Pat Robertson says some miraculous thing happened, there's no real way to verify that. There's no way that there's no way that's not testable. You can't do religious peer review where other preachers will go and test his miracle claim and say, I'm sorry, that doesn't quite hold up. There are no journals, right? So you quite frequently hear religious people and Christians make this sort of false equivalence. Well, you say that my faith, your faith in science is just like my faith in God. No, not even close. Sure, there is a certain degree of trust, as you point out, when you accept something that a scientist says on about a certain topic where you don't have any background in that field. But it's a whole different kettle of fish from the kind of faith, the degree of faith that religion asks you to adopt when they talk about what is essentially magic.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why when people will ask me about things like string theory or quantum mechanics that I'm not sufficiently versed in the subject to actually have an opinion. All I can tell you is what I've read. But if somebody says, well, do you believe string theory? No. I don't. Mm-hmm. I don't understand it well enough to say that I actually believe it. I don't have a good enough model in my head to even identify what it is that I would be agreeing with.
I don't believe in evolution.
Well, that's different. The belief in or belief that.
Oh, yeah.
I believe that evolution actually occurred.
Yeah.
The question is, do I believe that string theory is true and accurate? No. But anyway, yeah, we kind of went on a little bit long there, Joe. I apologize.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You basically answered my question, because I hadn't thought of it that way. So yeah, it does make a lot more sense if you put it into perspective, and the difference between belief and truth. So.
Yeah, it's one of those things where
The words kind of intermingle, but at the same time, they're not really the same thing. They seem like they are, but in a sense, they're not.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why my definition of faith is that that's the excuse people give for believing something if they don't have good reason. Trust, though, usually has a good reason behind it, and it's apportioned to the supporting evidence and stuff. I don't even really put them in the same ballpark, other than we're really talking about the basis for accepting a claim. And one of them is about probabilities. Trust is how likely is it that I'm actually correct, and what risk is there if I accept this claim as is. The other one, faith, you can't calculate the probabilities, or you get divided by 0 errors.
Was it Spinoza who said, whenever I'm evaluating a claim, I ask myself, would it be more... or was it Hume where he said...
Reject the larger miracle.
Yeah, if the claim were untrue, would it be more amazing if this claim were untrue than if it were true? Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, thanks a lot for the call, Joe. Appreciate it.
Move on. Thanks.
Whoop. I hit that too quick.
Okay.
Don in Houston, how are you?
Hello?
Hello, you're on. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Hey, Matt, I just wanted to say, first off, man, I'm the caller from last week. I wanted to apologize. I was just joking, but...
Oh, the douchebag.
Yeah, that's me. That's me.
Yeah, I got your email.
Sorry, say again?
I got your email. I just didn't reply to it. I figured you'd call back at some point.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I just wanted to let you know. Anyways, no, I was going to call because, or I am calling because I was just curious to what y'all thought, of any of the natural theological arguments. Are there any specific ones that y'all think are more likely or more reasonable than other ones?
Sure, there are some that will seem more reasonable than others, but when you talk about whether or not any of them are both valid and sound, no.
Oh, you don't think any of them are?
Well, no. If I did, I would be a theist.
Well, I mean reasonable in the sense that you don't have to necessarily jump on board, but it could make it.
That's not reasonable. That's not the way syllogisms work.
Yeah.
Well, no, syllogisms, in of themselves, because then it would be.
Well, I think
necessary. Yeah.
I think I know what you're asking, Don. And what I'll say is that I can respect the fact that apologists who are in the habit of employing these logical proofs do at least recognize that the whole faith thing that we just talked about with the previous caller isn't necessarily good enough, and that there is a real need to take an intellectual approach to defending Christianity, and I can at least respect that activity. Yeah, I mean, I respect that they understand that, and they really are trying to exercise their minds in their defense of the faith. So, if that's what you're asking, yeah, I mean, I do acknowledge that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, it's nice that there's an effort made as opposed to just saying, well, you just kind of got to take it on faith, or it's a personal. For God has personally revealed Himself to me. Well, that's great, but it doesn't do anybody else any good.
Right, argument from religious experience. Well, I mean, what faults? I mean, I know good old William Lane Craig. I know he can be a jerk sometimes, but he's the foremost defender of the kalam cosmological argument. I mean, what do y'all think of that?
It's
we've talked about it so many times.
It's slightly better than Pascal's wager. I'll give it credit for being difficult to address because the concepts are often beyond what people are familiar with without actually spending time digging into this stuff. Apart from that, I mean, I think it was you and Russell, didn't you guys do a whole episode on kalam?
Was it that, or did we talk about it when we were taping that one time at your place because the studio was closed?
I don't know. We've addressed it.
But we've done
times.
it. Yeah, we've done it once.
And there's a response up on
about kalam before. Yeah.
And there's a response, or I didn't write all of it, or actually any of it probably. There's a response on the Iron Chariots wiki about kalam as well.
Yeah, page there. And
I don't find it very impressive.
Well,
at all.
what kalam tries to do, right, is it tries to get against the whole infinite regress problem of just the basic first cause argument by essentially switching the wording of its premise around to talk about anything that begins to exist must have a cause. And in phrasing it this way, kalam then, simply by fiat, categorizes God as a thing that didn't begin to exist. But the problem right there is, well, how do you, where does that, the confidence in that assertion come from, right? I mean, you could say God is not a thing that began to exist, but why should I simply assume that as a premise right off the bat? So I think it fails in the same way that a lot of the logical proofs for God fail, like Tag and some of the others, in that it doesn't support its own premises very well. And in fact, I think it's guilty of begging the question, which is where, the conclusion, what it seeks to prove is essentially stated in the premise. And that's a logical fallacy.
It's a little bit of a cheat to... The old cosmological arguments were easily defeated by the, well, then where did God come from? And so the reforming of this to be that which begins to exist has a cause, and therefore there must be something that didn't begin to exist, and we're going to call that God. Great. Well, even if kalam is true, which is not, but even if it was, the most you could get out of it is that there's something. You can't get to any characteristics of it other than something eternal as a prime mover thing. You can't tell whether it's intelligent, whether it even still exists, etc. And because the models that attempt to build off of this go back to kind of a call we had from last week, where there's this something outside of space and time, well, we have no demonstration that any such thing is possible. And moreover, there are models of the universe in which we can say, yes, the universe, as we understand it, had a beginning. But that doesn't mean, we've got the idea of time beginning with the beginning of the universe as well. So saying before the Big Bang just doesn't make any sense. There was no before.
Which is a very hard concept for people to wrap their heads around, right? Because we think of things in terms of our own experience of things. It's hard to imagine a period of no time. Right?
Lawrence Krauss has a really good talk that he gave, I think at like the 2009 AAI on a universe from nothing. These also fall into the category of I don't understand them well enough to actually vouch for them, or say what my confidence level is. But I can say that I experience some existence, and even absent a good explanation for its origins, doesn't mean I should start accepting bad explanations for its origins. No matter how convincing an argument seems, at the end of the day, there needs to be evidence backing it up. And I actually don't find that argument that convincing, because I can conceive of a model of a universe that has always existed, and what we identify now, as far as always has any meaning, and what we identify as universe right now is simply the current transitional state of this universe.
Yeah.
That at the point of the Big Bang, something which had always existed became the time-space continuum in which we reside.
Yeah, the only thing that the Big Bang Theory describes, and this is a point a lot of people miss, and although if I'm wildly wrong, I expect our resident physicist in the studio audience to throw a chair at me in about a second and a half. But I think that what the Big Bang Theory describes, you could say, is it's just the event that caused the universe to expand into its present form. Right? It's not necessarily a creation ex nihilo thing. It doesn't necessarily say, and before that there was nothing at all whatsoever. Right? It describes an expansion event.
Right.
I mean, think about it. If something had to go bang in the Big Bang, right? I mean, but we can't really say anything definite. And the problem that I have with, just to mention one more difficulty that logical proofs for God have, is that at the end of the day, even if you have one of these that is bulletproof in its construction, right? And you can construct a logical argument that is faultless and still false, right?
Well, no.
Well, all dogs die. George Washington is dead. George Washington was a dog. It's wrong.
Well, that doesn't.
But
that
you
means
can't.
It's not faultless.
But I mean, but in terms of the logical structure of it, right?
Well, there's a difference between validity and soundness.
That's what I mean.
Validity goes to structure, and soundness goes to content.
But it's like, how do, even once you've still got this proof, it's like, well, how do you say that what you've just described in this logical proof still maps to anything in reality, right? Because you can come up with that's the tag argument when you had that big episode with Matt Slick, and I wish I'd sort of been there to just be able to talk to Matt Slick for a bit and say, look, I just replaced the word God in your conclusion with flying spaghetti monster, and we have exactly the same proof, right? So,
Well,
at the end of the day, I mean, can you really say that, okay, you have this really, really great logical proof, but are you still describing something that actually exists with this proof, or is this just an intellectual exercise? That's another problem that I have. So.
Well, y'all brought up a lot of objections. I'm trying to decide who to respond here.
Babble.
That was well, I will say, though, that you, I forget which one of y'all brought it up, but that if, even if the kalam is successful, and I quote you, it's not, but even if it was, we wouldn't know the properties of the first cause or whatever it is. And if the argument's unsuccessful, obviously we wouldn't. But in the more recent variations of the kalam, we would know something like changelessness, timelessness, like it's a timeless being, and immaterial.
I don't know how you got changelessness. Which has absolutely nothing to do with the kalam cosmological argument.
Well, it does, if you want me to explain it.
Oh, please, because this is a first. Changelessness.
Well, if it goes, obviously the argument's from infinite regress. We can't have an infinite regress, and then so therefore we must have
That's
the
not
first
kalam.
cause. Huh?
That's not kalam.
No, that's...
Well, the first, I know what the kalam is. Whatever begins to exist has a cause.
Sure.
The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. But I'm saying,
how do you get from that argument to therefore this cause is changeless?
All right. If you give into the three premises and you agree with the conclusion, then you can analyze what kind of being, deity, whatever you want to call it, that the first cause is, or whatever caused the universe. And or immaterial, the being immaterial and changeless.
How did you get to it being a being?
Well, I think it has to be conscious because...
How did you get to... Why would you think it has to be conscious?
Yeah, see,
I was about to try and explain.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, it's honestly been a while since I've looked at the argument, but if I remember correctly, a being can't, and there's only two things that can bring about how does it go? I remember reading...
Here it is right here. I've got it right here, okay? So two premises. Everything that has a beginning of its existence has a cause of its existence. The universe has a beginning of its existence. Therefore, the universe has a cause of its existence. If the universe has a cause of its existence, then that cause is God. Therefore, God exists. That's the classical argument, okay? Now, what kalam does is that Craig modified it to this. Whatever begins to exist has a cause.
Right.
The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. And the cause is the God of classical theism and is a personal being because he chose to create the universe. Now, how he goes from 1, 2, and 3 to 4 is where the argument happens, right?
Right.
I'm still wondering how you got to consciousness.
Well, I'm wondering how Craig gets to...
I think I vaguely remember we sort of got in a little bit deeper than I was hoping. I was hoping for a general discussion of the arguments, but
well,
but
you called in about kalam, and now you're saying you haven't looked at it a while and didn't know you were going to get into a deep discussion about it. Here's a good idea: go study it and call back another time.
Well, I think if you go back, I didn't specifically say let's argue the kalam. I said, what do you think about it?
Sure.
But what I would say about the consciousness aspect is that, if I remember correctly, he said that a non-conscious being can't bring about, and something infinite has to bring about a non-infinite universe.
Let me.
And so, go ahead.
Let me pause for a second because you start with, if I remember correctly, he said. Well, whether or not you remember correctly is one thing, but why do I care what he said? But then
Because
you
that's
talk.
the argument.
I don't care what he said. I mean,
You're
you're citing
about
this
the
as
argument.
if there's.
I'm telling you the argument. If he wrote the argument, then that's what he said.
Okay, no, you're trying to construct it from memory, and Martin just read it. But anyway, that doesn't make any difference. You just said that non-conscious beings can't.
Wait.
Now, hang on. The words that you said were non-conscious beings can't. And first of all, that makes no sense. It's got the same type of assumption in there. It's assuming that we're only talking about beings and limiting it to there, and then saying, oh, non-conscious beings can't do this kind of action, so it must have been a conscious being.
Okay, first of all, you were saying about memory. Why should I? You need to brush it up, and you can't bring it up if it's just from memory and you don't know for sure. He was just talking about Spinoza. I think it was Spinoza that said that. That's from memory. It's from another person. It can still be legitimate, even though he might not know it word for word. The concept's still the same.
No, well, I'm not challenging whether or not people should be able to say things from memory. I'm challenging whether or not you are reliably and accurately relaying the information that you're trying to remember after admitting that it's been a while. And since I've spent a lot of time on this argument, and one of the biggest objections is how do you get from X, there must have a first cause, to this first cause is a conscious being, and have found nothing along those lines. I'm just asking you how you get there. And if your response is, well, if I remember right, he said, that's not an argument, that's just an appeal to what somebody else said.
It would be an argument from authority if I said, because he said it, it's correct. But that's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that if I remember correctly, if I remember correctly, all dogs die, blah, blah, blah. Just even if I'm inaccurate with my memory, if the concept's still legitimate.
Okay, I think we're getting into like.
If you're inaccurate, then it's pointless to continue, is my point.
If my memory is inaccurate but the argument's still legitimate, why would you even care?
Because if the argument is legitimate and you relay an entirely different argument, then we wasted a bunch of time. What's the point in debating an argument or discussing an argument that isn't the actual argument?
So you're saying if I added to the argument myself and I improved the kalam cosmological argument right here, but it's not the original kalam cosmological argument that I was trying to relay, then you would say it's pointless.
No, that's not even close to remotely what I'm saying. I've asked you to present a valid argument for how you get to consciousness, and you haven't even come close to attempting that. All you've done is tried to remember how somebody else might have done it, and you haven't gotten that accurate. Present whatever argument you want for how you get from first cause to consciousness, but present it as an argument.
Okay, well, if we're on the same page there, then I have no problem with that. I guess we got a little bit confused there when you brought up me inaccurately remembering something. I think that's
because
somewhat irrelevant.
the only argument that you're presenting, if you had just presented an argument, I don't care where it comes from. It doesn't impress me anymore that an argument comes from William Lane Craig or a dog. Well, all right, if it came from a dog, that would actually be fairly impressive. But it doesn't make any difference. I don't judge the validity or soundness of an argument based on the person who's relaying it. What I'm saying is present what is the justification for getting to consciousness? And in answer to that, instead of presenting an argument, the best you could do is say, well, if I remember right, he said something like, that gets us nowhere.
Well, yeah, no, I think I agree in general. It's just general conjecture. I wasn't trying to absolutely prove it. I'm just throwing out an idea for how we could get to first consciousness, and then
what's the idea?
From there.
What's the idea? Because we got 10 minutes left. So what's the idea for how to get to the first cause must be conscious?
Okay,
because I don't see the link in Craig's argument. I don't see where he gets from his premises to this must be not only a God, not only a thinking, intelligent being, but it has to be this specific God, this specific thinking, intelligent being.
Well, I'm just going to let him just give me anything
I'll
about
go
consciousness.
I'll go ahead and give my last shot at it. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Therefore, the universe began to exist. And the universe is not infinite. It's finite. And a finite thing can't bring about another finite thing without there being an infinite regress of causes. And so an infinite thing would have to bring about a finite thing. And in order to do that, an infinite thing, the infinite being whatever it is, would have to be conscious, otherwise the thing that it created would also be infinite.
Wow. Yeah, I tell you what, I'm sure this clip will end up on YouTube, and when it does, transcribe it and write that down.
No, I'm not saying that's legitimate. I'm just telling you that's how I remember it. You asked for it. I'm just telling you.
First of all, at best you got to an infinite thing. You didn't demonstrate that there was any necessity of consciousness for this infinite thing. And you threw the word being in there again, although that hasn't been justified either. That's my point.
Well, I think if it is conscious, then it would be, a being.
Well, yes,
So,
I agree. If it's conscious, it's a being. And you haven't offered a justification for it being a being or for it being conscious. At best, even if I accepted your entire argument, you only got to infinite. Not being and not conscious.
Okay, that's fine with me. I have no problem with that. I called in for a discussion about natural theological arguments, and here we are.
You have no problem with...
Great.
Okay.
All right?
Cool. Catch you later, Don. Thanks.
Thanks for the call, Don.
All right.
Let's see.
So want to say stuff, but it's just not fair. Jorge in Utah.
Hey, how's it going, guys? That was kind of painful to go through, but okay.
Yeah, sorry
Be
about
where we're sitting.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
I'm calling because, for one, I'm not from the Utah area originally, and because of this, I'm obviously not of the faith, and I've tried, I talk to everybody. I'm very much open on my lack of belief. But my question is, how can I approach members of the LDS Church, considering how prominent it is here in Utah, but also it seems to be kind of spreading throughout the rest of the U.S. Rather fast.
Do you want to approach them, or do you just want to know how to respond when they approach you?
Well, I know how to respond to them, but it seems to me that, a couple of people are on the verge of, kind of breaking away. But because they're so firmly indoctrinated, there's no way to, break through those barriers. I mean, I give them examples of, hey, there's no explanation, there's no reason to believe in any of this. And they go, well, yes, there is. I've seen it, I felt it, and I can't break that past that barrier that they've set up.
Yeah, first of all, on the how to approach them thing, I don't go door to door. I don't make outgoing calls from here. So I'm engaging people who are asking to engage on various subjects. On this issue of personal experience, it's a powerful thing. Because we rely a lot on induction about our past experiences influence the kind of decisions we're going to make about future events. And I can tell you that, when I was a Southern Baptist, I could have talked about and would have talked about personal experiences I had. Hey, I've been in the church and I've been singing and praying and praising and, had goosebumps and the euphoric feeling that everybody around me identifies as the Holy Spirit, and there just was no other explanation for it. And it was later that, of course, I found out, well, by George, there are other explanations for it, and they're all much more plausible than a magical invisible being that goes around and giving people goosebumps.
Yeah. And when something hits you with a great deal of emotional force, you're going to sort of interpret that experience through whatever kind of biases, whatever kind of previous, belief filters that you've installed. So in many ways, just personal experience is not necessarily the best testimonials. It's certainly not. This is why we say anecdotes are not evidence, right?
Right.
A person who really, 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 really wants to believe in God and really does believe in God is going to see God everywhere. They're going to see God in, squirrels and trees and, just whatever. So so that's the first thing to take into account, is that our minds, we're subject to confirmation bias. We can be incredibly unreliable, and we believe what we want to believe in most cases.
Sorry.
So, no, I'm done. Pretty much.
The really quick and easy kind of thing, and I rely, as you've seen, a lot on questions. And here's the thing: if somebody tells me they've had some personal experience and that this is the reason for their belief, I have no doubt that they've, well, I guess I have some doubt. I have very little doubt that they've had a personal experience. So my questions are, given that you have had some experience, what is the justification for your explanation of it? Because that's important. Oh, well, you know, I watched somebody singing and praying, and they fell on the floor, twitching around and speaking in tongues, and now I know that the Holy Spirit, you know, was filling this person. Well, how do you know that? Is that the only explanation? Is that even the best explanation? Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. It seems like it goes even deeper than that, because I have talked to people here. In fact, there was a girl who was, you know, friends with me for a few months, and then she got engaged, which that's a whole nother topic. But I started asking her, you know, so why are you getting married? And she's like, well, you know, because I've known him for a little while, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, yeah, but what's the hurry to get married? Well, because of this and that. And eventually I broke down all of her reasons, and she admitted that one of the main reasons was so that she could have sex. And I said, well, don't you think that sex is less important than marriage? I mean, on a hierarchy of importance of big decisions, I would put marriage much higher than I would put sex. Then what her answer to me was, you know, I don't think I can talk to you about this to you anymore, because you make me question myself. and this is kind of the example, and this is pretty much predominant with just about anybody who's in this area with this church.
Yeah, well, don't expect this sort of immediate, you know, this flip of the light switch of, suddenly reason has occupied my brain, right? I mean, it's this, right. It's going to be a gradual process. It's a long, painful. If they really are going to deconvert at some point, you know, it's not going to happen in a day or a week or even a month. It could take years. So
I don't even know why you asked us, because it sounds like you're doing fine.
Yeah, I mean, you're putting the seeds there, and that scary, tingly feeling she's feeling between her ears, that's called thinking. And, you know, she's going to keep it up at some point, and it scares her right now, but she'll keep it up. And, you know, or she might not. You can't control that. Only she can control that. But
I got to let you go, Jorge, because we're almost out of time, but I appreciate it. Thanks so much for calling.
Thank you.
So we've got like a minute left. And, hey, Tyler in Des Moines?
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't have any reason to believe that aliens have actually visited the Earth, but it's possible that life exists in other places in the universe. Matter of fact, it's probable, almost certain, given the vastness of it. But I don't know either way, and I don't see any reason to think that they're responsible for ancient civilizations or whatever the History Channel wants to pump out. That's about all I got for you. That's it for the show. Thanks everybody. I didn't even get to say anything.
Yeah.
There's the people who actually make the show happen. Thanks, Martin. Everybody enjoy whatever holiday you do or don't celebrate. Even if you're enjoying just being a Grinch, take pride in your Grinchiness and make it as pleasurable for you as possible without bothering or hurting anybody else.
And the callers we didn't get to, email us, tv@atheist-community.org, and we'll answer you there. Okay?